The sun was setting as I sat in my office, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, ready to type out a message to my lawyer. It had been a long day of meetings, but my thoughts kept circling back to the phone call I had just received from my mother, Hannah. The moment her name flashed on the screen, I knew something was off. The smug tone in her voice confirmed it before she even finished speaking. "Olivia, darling," she said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "I just gave James the money for his house down payment. $250,000. Isn't that just fantastic?" I gripped the edge of my desk, forcing a smile as I responded, trying to keep my voice steady. "That's wonderful, Mom. Really great. James deserves it." "Of course, sweetheart," she continued. "I know you've been focusing on your career and all, and we understand that you couldn't help him out like you did with the others." My heart sank. The others. My so-called lifestyle choices. It was always the same. I had spent years building a thriving business from the ground up, all while covering for their mistakes, their financial woes. I had been the family ATM, pouring money into their pockets, while they treated me like the spare change they could discard whenever they felt like it. "You probably wish you could have helped him, don't you?" she asked, her voice full of faux sympathy. "But we understand, Olivia. You've been so focused on your business empire lately." I forced a chuckle. "Actually, Mom, I've been doing just fine. But I know how much James means to you." Her next words sent a wave of frustration through me. "Yes, well, James is our priority right now. And as for you, Olivia, we just thought you'd have more time for the family now that you've made it." I could hear the judgment in her words, the underlying implication that my success wasn't worth anything compared to their constant demands. I opened my laptop, trying to ignore the sting. But my phone buzzed again, this time with a notification from my bank app. I glanced at the screen and froze. There it was. They had tried to access my account. 3 failed attempts within the last hour. I could feel the blood drain from my face as the implications sank in. I cut her off mid-sentence. "Mom, I need to go. I'm in the middle of a client meeting." "Oh, always working," she responded, the condescension palpable. I know. Take care of yourself, Olivia. You'll see things differently one day, sweetheart. Maybe when you realize men don't like women who are too independent." I slammed the phone down and texted my lawyer, Grace. "It's happening. They've tried to access my account." Grace responded immediately. "Holy shit, you actually did it. Are you okay?" I stared at my reflection in the window of my office. 33 years old, self-made, and finally done being the family's emotional and financial crutch. For the first time, I felt relief wash over me. My phone buzzed again. Another message. It was from my younger brother, Luke. "Olivia, what the hell? Mom's freaking out. The account's empty." "Not empty," I replied, my fingers shaking slightly. "Closed. There's a difference." "But we need that money, Liv," he protested. "This was for emergencies. You can't just leave us high and dry." I let out a bitter laugh. "Luke, the only emergency here is the one you keep creating. I've been bailing you all out for years. No more." The phone went quiet for a moment before Luke's voice crackled through the speaker. "I don't get it, Liv. You've always been there. Always." "Yeah," I snapped, my words sharp. "Always. And I'm done." The doorbell rang and I glanced up at the security camera. It was Mom and Dad standing on my front porch, looking desperate. I sighed and texted Grace. "They're here. Time to finish this." I opened the door and let them in, my heart heavy. They walked in and I could see the panic in their eyes, the realization dawning on them that their safety net had just disappeared. "Olivia, what is this?" my dad demanded, his voice shaking. I didn't waste time. "It's time to face the music, Dad," I said, standing tall. "You've taken advantage of me for far too long, and now it's over." Mom stepped forward, her hands trembling. "You've always been the good daughter. The responsible one. You can't just cut us off like this." I stood my ground. "I'm done being the responsible one. I'm done playing the role you've given me. You've drained me dry, and I'm finally taking control of my life." Dad looked at me, his eyes filled with anger and disbelief. "You're throwing away everything we've done for you? You've built your empire on our backs." "No, Dad," I said, my voice steady. "I built my empire despite you, not because of you." My mom's face crumpled, and for the first time I saw the guilt in her eyes. It was fleeting, but it was there. "Olivia," she whispered, "we didn't mean to hurt you." "No, you didn't mean to hurt me," I said coldly. "But you did. And now you'll face the consequences." Grace had already set up the meeting with my lawyer, and we were ready to make sure they understood just how deep their actions had gone. The next chapter was just beginning. The evening sky outside my office was dimming, but my mind was sharp, every thought cut through like a blade. I was done. Done with the endless phone calls, done with the fake sympathy, done with the financial drain that had been my life for far too long. I had always been the reliable one, the one they turned to when they needed help. But no more. Now I was finally starting to breathe. When my mom and dad had left, defeated, my mind raced. I couldn't shake the feeling of powerlessness I'd carried for years, suffocated by family expectations and my role as the good daughter. I had built my success from scratch, but every time I had made progress, they had drained my resources, my energy, my time. They'd used guilt like a weapon, and I had fallen for it every single time. But no more. I was no longer a puppet in their game. I took a deep breath and sat at my desk, opening my laptop again. The spreadsheet Grace had helped me put together was right there, staring at me. The full extent of my financial sacrifice. It was more than just money, it was the years of missed opportunities, the dreams deferred because my family needed me more than I needed myself. I had painstakingly documented every loan, every emergency payment, every single dollar I had sent to my parents and siblings over the years. Each number was a reminder of how they had used me, how they had guilt me into giving up my future for theirs. The total sat there at the bottom of the sheet, a glaring testament to my own gullibility, $347,220. That was how much I had sacrificed for them over the years, and for what? For James's house. For Dad's truck repairs. For Mom's medical bills, which, by the way, were still unpaid, despite my best efforts. I stared at the total and felt a hollow pit in my stomach. But then something strange happened. The weight that had always pressed down on me began to lift. It was a mix of anger and freedom. I had finally let go of the guilt, the weight of responsibility that wasn't mine to carry. I glanced at my phone as it buzzed again. Grace had texted, "The papers are ready. We can move forward whenever you're ready." "Do it," I texted back. It was time. The evidence was clear, and I was done playing their game. I was ready to fight back. The next day, everything shifted. I sat at my desk, watching the clock as the scheduled meeting time drew nearer. My lawyer, Grace, was set to meet with me in an hour, and I could feel the tension in the air, thick and palpable. But I had no fear. This was the moment. It was no longer about just me, it was about sending a message. When Grace arrived, she sat across from me, a somber expression on her face. I could tell she understood the gravity of what was happening. This wasn't just a financial dispute, it was a full-on reckoning. We had prepared everything for this day. I had gathered all the evidence, every scrap of paper that showed how they had taken advantage of me. The fraudulent signatures on documents, the bank statements, the emails, they were all part of the twisted web they had spun around me. But it wasn't just about money. It was about control. For years, they had believed they could manipulate me into giving them whatever they wanted. The time had come for them to realize I wasn't a child anymore, and I wasn't going to let them continue to drain me, physically, emotionally, and financially. The doorbell rang. I stood up, my heart steady, my mind focused. This was it. Mom and Dad stood on my doorstep, their faces pale and tense, a far cry from the smugness I had heard on the phone the night before. I could tell they were trying to maintain their composure, but the cracks were showing. My mother's eyes darted around nervously, while my father's jaw clenched as if he was holding back a storm. I stepped aside, allowing them into the house, my gaze unwavering. This wasn't just a family dispute anymore. This was about taking back my life, my future. As they sat across from me, I watched them closely. I could see the realization starting to dawn on them. They had no control over me anymore. I wasn't the same person I had been years ago, the one who bent to their will, who worked herself into the ground just to please them. I opened the folder on my desk and pulled out the first document. "Do you remember this?" I asked, my voice calm but firm. Mom glanced at it, her expression faltering. "Olivia, what is this?" "It's the loan I gave you for Dad's truck repairs. You know, the one I never got paid back for," I replied coolly. "And it's just the first of many." My father shifted uncomfortably, but I didn't stop. I opened another page. "Here's the money I gave you last year for Mom's surgery, $35,000. How much of that went to the hospital, Mom? How much of it was actually used for your medical bills?" Her eyes dropped to the table. "Olivia, we didn't mean for this to go like this." I leaned in, my voice steady but piercing. "No, you didn't mean to get caught. But you did. And now it's time to pay the price." Grace, sitting beside me, flipped open her briefcase and pulled out the legal papers. "Mrs. Harris, Mr. Harris, these documents contain all the evidence you need to understand the consequences of your actions. Forged signatures, stolen funds, manipulated accounts. This is a serious matter." I watched their faces change as they absorbed the weight of what was happening. They were used to being the ones in control, the ones who always manipulated me into giving more. But now the tables had turned. Dad stood up, his fists clenched. "Olivia, you're not the daughter I raised. This isn't you." I stood up, meeting his gaze. "No, Dad. I'm the daughter who finally stopped playing by your rules. I'm the daughter who stopped being a pawn in your games." Mom started to cry, her face a mixture of anger and desperation. "You're ruining this family. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us." I shook my head. "No, Mom. You've never done anything for me. You've used me, manipulated me, drained me. And I'm done. We're done." I pulled out the final piece of evidence, the one that had taken me the longest to uncover. It was a set of forged property documents from the villa in Spain, documents that had been sold without my consent, documents that had been stolen from me. "Do you want to explain this?" I asked, my voice cold. Her face turned pale as she realized what I was holding. "Olivia, please, just let it go." I stood my ground. "No, Mom. You can't run from this. Not anymore." The silence that filled the room was suffocating. I could feel the weight of their years of manipulation coming to an end. My mother, the woman who had always been able to guilt me into submission, was now the one who was helpless. The silence that followed hung heavy, like a thick fog rolling in, swallowing up all the space between us. My parents were defeated, their defenses shattered, their plan to manipulate me finally laid bare. They were grasping at straws now, trying to justify the years of financial exploitation, but nothing they could say would change the truth. I sat back in my chair, a quiet calm settling over me. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for. The moment I could stop being their ATM, their fixer, their ever-present safety net. The moment I could finally breathe again. But as they sat there, still reeling from the magnitude of their actions being exposed, I felt no satisfaction. This wasn't about winning. It was about reclaiming what was rightfully mine, the peace of mind that had been stolen from me, the freedom I had lost in the name of family obligation. I watched as my mother dabbed at her eyes, tears still streaking down her face, while my father fumed, his hands balled into fists. He was always the one who had been the loudest, the most forceful in trying to manipulate me. But today his fury was impotent. Grace, who had been silently observing the entire exchange, leaned forward, her voice cutting through the tension in the room. "I'm afraid this is just the beginning, Mrs. Harris. The authorities are already involved. You've crossed a line and it's not just about family anymore." My father's eyes flickered to Grace and then back to me, a hint of panic creeping into his expression. "You don't understand, Olivia. We've been through so much. This isn't the way to handle it." I shook my head, the words I had been holding in for years finally slipping out, raw and unfiltered. "No, Dad. This is exactly how it's going to be handled. You've used me for too long, taken too much. You never once considered what it was doing to me, to my life. You only cared about what I could give you. My mother's sobs grew louder, but I didn't flinch. I had heard it all before, the pleas, the promises, the manipulative guilt trips. They weren't going to work this time. I opened the folder in front of me and slid the next document toward them, a transfer record from a joint bank account I had once shared with them. It was from several years ago, but it was still vivid in my mind. The money had been transferred under the guise of a family emergency, yet the funds had never been used for their intended purpose. "Remember this one, Mom?" I asked coldly. "You convinced me to transfer $50,000 into this account. You said it was for your medical bills, but I later found out that none of it went toward your treatment. Instead, it paid off Dad's personal debts." She winced, her hands shaking as she reached for the paper, but I didn't let her take it. "No, Mom. You don't get to play the victim anymore. You're just as guilty as Dad." My father stood up abruptly, knocking his chair over in the process. "This is insane, Olivia. You can't just destroy everything like this. You're tearing this family apart." I remained seated, my gaze unwavering. "No, Dad. You tore it apart a long time ago. I'm just finally putting the pieces back together." The room fell into another long, suffocating silence. My parents had nothing left to say. They were defeated, and it showed in the way their shoulders slumped and their eyes avoided mine. This was the end of the game they had been playing for so long. I stood up, pushing my chair back with a soft scrape, and walked to the window. The sky outside was dark now, the faintest glow of the moon peeking through the clouds. It was as if the world was holding its breath along with me. Behind me, I could hear my mother's voice crack as she spoke again. "Olivia, please, we're sorry. We didn't know how much we were hurting you. We never meant to." I turned to face her, cutting her off before she could finish. "You didn't mean to? You didn't mean to? How many times have I heard that? How many times have I let you get away with it because I was too scared to say no? You don't get to apologize for this anymore. It's too late for that." My father finally spoke again, his voice trembling with a mixture of anger and shame. "You've ruined everything. You've ruined this family." I met his gaze with steady eyes, my voice firm. "No, Dad. You ruined this family a long time ago when you started using me as your personal bank account, your emotional crutch. You thought I would always be there, that I would always bail you out. But I'm done. I'm done being the one who fixes everything for everyone else while I get nothing in return." They both stared at me, their faces filled with disbelief. They had always expected me to bend to their will, to be the one who always helped, who always gave. But now they were seeing a different side of me, a side that was no longer willing to be taken advantage of. "Olivia, please," my mother whispered. "We need your help. We've always needed you." "You've never needed me, Mom. You've needed what I could give you. And I'm not doing that anymore," I said, my voice steady and calm. Grace stood up, signaling the end of this conversation. "We've done everything by the book. The papers are filed, the accounts are closed. There's no going back now. The consequences are in motion." My father looked at her, his face twisted in anger. "You're just going to let her do this? Let her destroy everything we've worked for?" I glanced at Grace, who nodded, confirming everything I had already known. "It's over, Dad. You've crossed a line you can't come back from. It's time to face the consequences." The finality in my words seemed to hit them both like a wave. They stood there, stunned, unable to respond. The moment my parents left, the weight of their presence lifted from the room. I stood there, motionless, staring at the documents spread out on my desk. The quiet was a stark contrast to the chaotic energy they had brought with them. But even in the silence, I could feel the storm that was just beginning to brew. I glanced at the clock on the wall. It was late, but I couldn't sleep. The adrenaline of the past few hours was still coursing through my veins, and I knew that the road ahead wasn't going to be easy. There would be more confrontations, more battles to fight, and more truths to expose. But for the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't even realized I was missing. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through the messages that had been flooding in while my parents were here. There were texts from Grace, updates from my lawyer, and of course, more from Lucia. "Don't let them get to you," Lucia's message read. "This is only the beginning. They'll try to manipulate you, guilt-trip you, but you're doing the right thing." I smiled softly, grateful for her support. She had always been there for me, even when I hadn't realized how much I needed someone like her. Unlike my family, Lucia didn't expect anything from me except honesty. She had been through her own battles with our family, and she had come out stronger on the other side. It was that strength that had drawn me to her, that had made her my ally in all of this. I responded quickly. I know. I'm just so tired of it all. I'm ready to be done. As I hit send, my phone buzzed again, another message, but this one wasn't from Lucia. It was from Bobby. Olivia, please. We need to talk. Mom and Dad are in pieces over this. They're losing everything and I don't know how to fix it. You're my sister. You've always been the one to fix things. Don't turn your back on us now. The words were familiar, the same pleading tone that had been a constant in our relationship. For years I had been the one to pick up the pieces for him, to bail him out when his plans fell apart, to make sure he didn't face any real consequences for his actions. And now here he was asking for more. Asking for me to do what I had always done, fix it. I stared at the message for a long moment, the weight of his words sinking in. He didn't understand. He never understood. This wasn't about family loyalty. It wasn't about saving him. It was about finally standing up for myself, about not letting them take advantage of me anymore. I typed my response slowly, carefully choosing my words. Bobby, you don't get it. I'm not fixing this for you anymore. I've spent my whole life trying to be the good daughter, the reliable one, the one who always picks up the slack. But I'm done being that person. You're an adult now. It's time to face the consequences of your own actions. The reply came quickly, a flood of frustration and anger. You can't be serious. You're just going to let us lose everything? You're going to turn your back on family? I felt a pang of guilt, but I quickly pushed it aside. Guilt was what had kept me trapped for so long. Guilt was what had kept me bending over backwards for people who never appreciated me. It was time for that to end. I set my phone down and took a deep breath. There was no going back now. The confrontation with my parents, the final severing of the ties that had bound me to them, it was all part of the process. They had to learn. They had to understand the consequences of their actions. I sat back down at my desk and turned to the laptop, opening the folder labeled Family Documents. It was time to make sure that the paperwork was in order. The lawyer had advised me to be thorough, to ensure that there was no room for them to wiggle out of this situation. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about accountability. The next day came faster than I expected. It was a blur of phone calls, emails, and messages as the fallout from last night's confrontation started to spread. My parents had already begun their campaign of manipulation, reaching out to extended family members, trying to paint me as the villain in all of this. They were calling me selfish, ungrateful, accusing me of abandoning them when they needed me the most. I didn't care. I wasn't interested in playing their game anymore. I had lived my whole life in the shadow of their expectations, always trying to be the perfect daughter, the perfect sister. But now I was finally free. Free to make my own choices, to live my own life. I knew it wouldn't be easy. There would be people who didn't understand, who would side with my parents. There would be family members who would accuse me of betraying them. But I had made my choice. And I was sticking to it. I stood in front of the mirror, looking at my reflection. The woman who stared back at me was different. Stronger. More determined. I wasn't the same person I had been a year ago, a month ago, or even a week ago. I was someone new. Someone who was finally ready to take control of her life and stop being a pawn in someone else's game. My phone buzzed again. This time it was from Grace. They're calling a family meeting tonight, she wrote. It's going to be a showdown. I sighed, the weight of what was coming crashing down on me. Let them have their meeting. I'll be ready. The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation. I made sure I had all the documents I needed, every transaction, every loan, every emergency payment, every instance where my family had taken advantage of me. It was all there, neatly organized, ready to be presented. When the time came, I met my parents at their house, a place I hadn't visited in months. The familiar scent of their old house filled the air, but it no longer felt like home. It felt like a place of old wounds and unspoken resentments. My parents were already seated at the table when I arrived. They looked tired, worn down by the stress of everything that had happened. But there was still that same air of entitlement about them. They still believed that they could manipulate me into doing what they wanted. I took a seat across from them, my posture straight, my expression unreadable. There would be no more caving, no more bending. This was my moment. My parents had lost the right to control me. "Olivia, please," my mother began, her voice strained. "We just want you to understand. This is a family matter. We need to be there for each other." "No," I said firmly. "This isn't about family. This is about the fact that you've been using me for years. You've taken everything from me and now you're asking for more. I'm done." My father's face flushed with anger. "You don't know what you're saying. You're ruining everything." "No, Dad," I said, shaking my head. "You ruined everything when you chose to manipulate me, when you thought you could control me with guilt and obligation. I'm done playing your game. I'm done being your ATM, your emotional crutch. You don't get to do that to me anymore." They sat there, silent, as the weight of my words sank in. There was nothing left for them to say. The truth had been spoken. The silence in the room hung thick as a dense fog, settling over my parents like a heavy blanket. My words had hit them harder than I expected. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the years of emotional manipulation, the years of them using me to fill the gaps in their lives without ever acknowledging how much they had drained from me. My father's hand clenched into a fist, the veins in his neck bulging with the strain of holding back his anger. "You've always been so difficult, Olivia," he muttered through gritted teeth. "Your mother and I have done everything we could for you, and this is how you repay us?" I stared at him, my expression cold, a far cry from the daughter who had once feared his wrath. "No, Dad," I said, my voice steady. "You didn't do everything for me. You did what was convenient for you. And I'm tired of being convenient." My mother's eyes welled up with tears, but they weren't the kind of tears that made me want to comfort her. No, these were the tears of someone who was beginning to realize that the world as she knew it was crumbling around her. She reached across the table, her hand trembling as she tried to touch mine. "Please, sweetheart, don't do this. We're family." I yanked my hand away, not wanting her touch, not wanting to be reminded of the years I had spent under her control, constantly trying to fix things that weren't mine to fix. "You don't get it, do you?" I said, my voice rising slightly. "This isn't about family. This is about control. You've controlled me for so long that I don't even know who I am without your demands." My father let out a bitter laugh. "You think you're some kind of victim, don't you? You're not a victim. You're just selfish." I shook my head. "No, Dad. I'm not selfish. I'm just finally standing up for myself. You can't guilt-trip me into helping anymore. You can't play on my sense of duty to make me fix your mistakes. I've had enough." They both sat there, stunned into silence for a few moments. My father's face was flushed with anger, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes now, a crack in his armor. He had always been the one to bully me into submission, but now it seemed like he was starting to understand that I wasn't the same person anymore. "Fine," he spat, his voice dripping with disdain. "If you want to go down this path, go ahead. But don't come crying to us when everything falls apart. You'll regret this." I stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "I won't regret it. I'm finally free." I looked at both of them, seeing them for what they really were, selfish, entitled people who had spent years draining the life out of me. And I was done. Before they could say another word, I turned and walked out of the room, leaving them in their silence. I didn't go home immediately. Instead, I drove aimlessly through the city, needing to clear my head. The wind rushed through the open window of my car, the cool air biting against my skin as I tried to make sense of everything that had just happened. The meeting had gone exactly as I had expected. My parents had tried to manipulate me, tried to make me feel guilty for cutting them off. But this time I had stood firm. I thought about the past. The years I had spent giving and giving, always trying to make them happy, always trying to meet their impossible expectations. They had used my love, my sense of duty, to control me. And now it was over. It had to be. I parked by the beach, the sound of the waves crashing against the shore filling the air. The sky was dark, the stars twinkling above me as I sat in the car, alone with my thoughts. It was strange, this feeling of freedom. After so many years of being trapped in their web, I felt light, unburdened. My phone buzzed in the passenger seat. I glanced at the screen, seeing a message from Grace. "How did it go?" she asked. I typed a quick response. "It's done. No going back now." Grace replied almost immediately. "You did the right thing, Olivia. They'll never understand, but you don't need their approval anymore." I smiled at her words. She was right. I didn't need their approval. I had spent so long trying to get it, trying to prove myself worthy of their love. But now I realized that their love had always been conditional. It had always been about what I could give them, not who I was. A car passed by, its headlights briefly illuminating the beach before it disappeared into the night. I stared out at the horizon, feeling the weight of the past slip away with each passing moment. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know what would happen when I went back home, when I saw my parents again, when they tried to come at me with their guilt and their manipulation. But I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't going to let them control me anymore. This was my life now, and I was going to live it on my terms. The next morning came with the weight of everything that had happened still hanging over me. I didn't feel the usual dread of another call or text from my parents, no anxiety creeping up as I wondered when the next demand would come. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. But that didn't mean the consequences of my decision weren't looming. I picked up my phone, the screen flashing with messages. There were several from Monica, one from Grace, and a few unknown numbers. My heart sank when I saw a missed call from my father. He hadn't wasted any time trying to get to me. He was probably still fuming from last night's confrontation. I swiped through the messages quickly, trying to gauge the situation. Monica's texts were filled with supportive words, checking in on me. Grace, too, sent a simple, "You did the right thing." But the message from my father, it was direct. "Olivia, we need to talk. This is getting out of hand. I'm coming by in an hour." I clenched my jaw. I knew this moment was coming, but part of me had hoped it wouldn't be so soon. I wasn't ready for the showdown. I wasn't ready for him to turn the tables and make it seem like I was the one who had overreacted, the one who was destroying the family. But there was no avoiding it. I had made my choice, and now it was time to deal with the fallout. I took a deep breath and replied, "We've already talked. I'm not changing my mind." I threw on a hoodie and made myself some coffee, trying to settle my nerves. The knock on the door came promptly, and I knew it was him before I even got up. I had a feeling my father wasn't going to make it easy for me, but I was done being the person who always gave in to his demands. When I opened the door, he stood there, his face tight with frustration, but I could see the worry in his eyes too. It wasn't the anger I expected, but something deeper. The fear of losing control. He had always been the one in charge, the one who made the decisions for the family. And now that I had taken that power back, he was scrambling. "Olivia, we need to talk," he said, his voice low but firm. "This isn't you. You're making a mistake. This whole thing, it's just not who you are." I crossed my arms, standing firm in the doorway. "No, Dad. This is exactly who I am. I'm not your ATM anymore. I'm not here to fix everything for you." His eyes flickered with a mix of anger and something else, maybe regret, or perhaps the realization that he couldn't manipulate me anymore. "You don't understand," he started, but I cut him off. "I understand perfectly," I replied, my voice steady. "You've always used me. You've always expected me to drop everything for you, to pay for your mistakes, to fix your messes. And I've done it for years. But not anymore. I'm done." He took a step closer, his face tightening. "You're being unreasonable, Olivia. This is family. You're supposed to help your family." I stared at him, seeing the hypocrisy in his words. "This isn't about helping family, Dad. This is about you and Mom using me to cover your mistakes. You never once asked if I could afford to keep bailing you out. You just expected it. And I let you. I thought it was my duty." "It's not duty," he snapped. "It's love. Family is about supporting each other. You can't just turn your back on us. I felt a bitter laugh rise in my chest, but I swallowed it down. You've always said that, but it's not love, Dad. It's control. You never cared about what I needed. Only about what you could take from me. And I'm done being your backup plan. His face darkened, and for a moment I thought he might lash out. But instead he just sighed, his shoulders slumping as he seemed to deflate in front of me. You've made your choice, he said quietly, almost defeated. I don't know what to say to you anymore. I held his gaze, my heart still beating in my chest, but now with a sense of clarity. There's nothing to say, Dad. You had your chance. And I've given you everything I can. But now it's time for me to take care of myself. He stared at me for a long time, his expression unreadable. Finally, he turned and walked out the door without another word. I sat down at the kitchen table, my hands shaking slightly. It wasn't the confrontation I had imagined. It wasn't a dramatic yelling match or a fight that left me in tears. It was quiet. Subdued. But it was a confrontation nonetheless. I had stood my ground, and for the first time in my life I hadn't backed down. The rest of the day was a blur of phone calls and texts. My parents tried calling repeatedly, but I didn't answer. They left voicemails begging me to come back, to fix things, to remember that I was still their daughter. I didn't listen to a single one. Grace checked in, sending me messages of support, asking if I was okay. I was. I knew I was doing the right thing, but the silence from my parents was deafening. The calm before the storm. It was only a matter of time before they tried to turn the rest of the family against me, to paint me as the villain in their story. But I was ready for it. I had built a life for myself, independent of their expectations and their manipulation. And now it was time to keep moving forward. Time to leave them behind. The days that followed were marked by a strange sense of freedom. It was as if I had stepped out of a cage I hadn't even realized I was in. The weight of years of guilt, expectations, and manipulation had been lifted. But I knew that it wouldn't stay this peaceful for long. My parents, especially my father, wouldn't let go so easily. They had to fight back, had to make me feel guilty for standing up for myself. They always had. I'd known this wasn't just about money. It wasn't even about the years of financial support I'd given them. It was about control, about the roles they had expected me to play in their lives, and how breaking free from those roles threatened everything they had worked to manipulate me into. For the first time, I understood it wasn't about me being ungrateful or selfish. It was about them losing their power over me. My phone buzzed with another message from Monica. She had been my rock through all of this, always supportive, always there to remind me why I had to do it. She knew the kind of pressure I had been under, the way my family had used my success to justify their own failures. She knew how hard it had been to cut them off, even if it felt like the right decision. Monica, so guess who just tried to reach out to me? I paused for a moment before replying. It wasn't hard to guess. The only person who would be foolish enough to try and find someone connected to me was my father. Me, let me guess. Dad? Her reply came quickly, as usual, a short laugh followed by the kind of dry humor only someone who had been through their own share of family drama could muster. Monica, you got it. He says he wants to clear the air. Whatever that means. Me, oh, he wants to manipulate me into feeling guilty again. I'm not falling for it. I set my phone down, feeling a mixture of anger and exhaustion. It was hard not to feel some lingering sense of responsibility, but that part of me, the part that always worried about how things might look to others, that always tried to make everyone happy, was slipping away. And it felt good. I grabbed a notebook and began jotting down some thoughts. It was something I had done for years, a habit I picked up after years of therapy and trying to make sense of all the emotional turmoil my family had caused. Writing helped me put everything into perspective. And today I needed it more than ever. I had spent my entire life trying to meet everyone else's expectations. My parents, Bobby, even extended family. Always helping, always fixing, always making sure they were okay while I let myself suffer. The moment I stopped, they came running. But this time I wasn't going to let them manipulate me again. The phone rang, breaking my thoughts. I looked at the screen. It was my mother. I had hoped I wouldn't hear from her for at least a little while longer, but here we were. I stared at the phone for a moment, hesitating. Then, with a deep breath, I answered. Hello? Olivia, my mother's voice cracked immediately, and I could hear the familiar whine of guilt creeping in. We need to talk. I've been thinking about everything about what you said. I sighed, leaning back in my chair, trying to keep calm. Mom, we've talked enough. You can't keep doing this. You can't just expect me to keep fixing everything for you. I'm not your backup anymore. I know, she said quietly, her voice laced with something I couldn't quite place. I know I've done wrong. But I'm your mother. And I've never asked for this much before. I shook my head, angry tears prickling at the corners of my eyes. You've been asking for it for years, Mom. You just didn't call it that. You asked me to pay for your mistakes, and I did it. I sacrificed my own life, my own happiness, just so you and Dad could keep pretending everything was fine. And it wasn't. She was silent for a moment. You've always been so strong, Olivia. I didn't realize how much I was asking of you. I'm sorry. I felt my breath catch. The apology, as rare as it was, didn't feel like the victory I thought it would. It felt hollow. Empty. Because nothing was going to change. This wasn't about an apology. It wasn't about me being right or wrong. It was about them losing control over me. I know you're sorry, I said softly. But sorry isn't enough anymore. You've hurt me, Mom. You've used me, and I'm done being the one who fixes everything. There was another long pause. Then she said the words that made my stomach churn. Is this it then, Olivia? Are we done? I closed my eyes, a lump rising in my throat. I don't know, Mom. I just know that I'm done being your ATM. Done letting you guilt trip me into fixing everything. If you really want to change, you need to show me. Not just with words, but with actions. You need to show me that you understand why I'm doing this. You've always been the strong one, she said again, a tearful edge to her voice. Maybe we don't deserve you, but I still love you. I always have. I rubbed my forehead, exhausted. I know. But love isn't about using someone until they break. I can't keep doing this. I understand, she said quietly, and then she hung up. I stared at the phone for a long time, my heart heavy but also relieved. This wasn't over. I knew my family would keep trying to worm their way back into my life. But I couldn't go back to being their pawn. I couldn't let them drag me down again. The days that followed were marked by an eerie silence. My family had retreated, or at least that's what it felt like. My phone wasn't buzzing every 5 minutes with more guilt-laden texts, my parents weren't showing up uninvited at my door, and Bobby had stopped calling. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace, even if it was temporary. I tried to focus on my work, to move forward with my own life, but a small part of me kept looking over my shoulder, waiting for the inevitable fallout. Because I knew that, despite everything I had done to protect myself, my family wasn't done. They were just biding their time, waiting for the right moment to strike. Monica had warned me about this, and her words stuck with me. Monica, they won't give up without a fight. It's not just about money, it's about control. You broke free, and they won't let you go without trying to pull you back. I thought about that often, especially as the days wore on. My life was supposed to be moving forward, yet I felt stuck in the same toxic cycle I'd been in for years. I had built a successful career from scratch, had made something of myself, but that wasn't enough for them. They still saw me as the one who should give until there was nothing left. The phone rang one afternoon, breaking the monotony of my thoughts. I glanced at the screen. It was my father. I rolled my eyes, feeling the familiar pang of dread. Taking a deep breath, I answered. Dad, I said, my voice guarded. Olivia, his voice was soft, too soft. It made me wary. We need to talk. About everything. I took a moment before responding. We've already talked. You don't get to manipulate me anymore, Dad. I'm done being your fallback. I'm done fixing everything for you. I never asked you to fix anything, Olivia. I just wanted to help the family. I've made mistakes, I admit that. But I'm your father. You can't just turn your back on us. We're blood. I was silent for a moment, biting back the anger rising in my throat. You never asked me, Dad. You expected me to help and you guilt me into it every time. I don't owe you my life, my happiness, or my bank account. I've been living for everyone else for so long, I forgot what it meant to live for myself. He let out a deep sigh. Olivia, I know things have been difficult between us, but I'm trying to understand. I never meant for you to feel like this. I just want to make things right. I could hear the desperation in his voice. But I also knew it wasn't real. It was the same thing he'd always done: apologize when it suited him, promise to change, and then revert right back to his old ways. No, Dad. You don't get to just apologize and expect everything to go back to normal. You don't get to use me to fix your problems. I'm not your ATM and I'm not your therapist. I'm done. There was a long silence. I could feel his gaze through the phone, could hear his shallow breaths as he processed what I'd just said. I'm your father, Olivia. This is family. And family helps family. Not when family takes advantage of you, I snapped. Not when family uses you for their own benefit, leaving you empty and broken in the end. Olivia, he said, his voice low and threatening now, you're making a mistake. You think you can live without us, but you'll see. You'll come back. You always do. I didn't answer immediately. I was no longer that girl. The one who felt compelled to help and fix everything for them, the one who couldn't say no, the one who thought her worth was measured by what she gave. I was free. No, Dad, I said, my voice firm. I won't be coming back. Not this time. I've built a life without you. A life that's mine. I don't need to be your fallback anymore. And I don't need your approval. I'm finally free of your expectations. I hung up the phone before he could respond. The weight that had settled on my chest over the years lifted just a little bit more. The next few weeks were quiet, too quiet. My inbox was filled with messages from clients, but the personal messages? They had slowed to a trickle. My parents, Bobby, they had all disappeared into the background, and for the first time in years I could hear myself think clearly. But that didn't mean the storm was over. The silence gave me time to reflect, to look back at everything that had led up to this moment. I'd built a career from scratch, a consulting business that had grown far beyond what I'd ever expected, yet my family had always seen me as an endless source of financial support. Every time I'd been sucked into their problems, their debt, their mistakes, they expected me to fix it. They'd always assumed that I would be there, a safety net they could fall back on. And I had let them. For years. But not anymore. I had cut the strings. No more unsolicited loans, no more bailing out their problems, no more giving them my energy, my time, my life. Yet despite that clarity, a part of me wondered, would they ever stop? Would they ever truly understand the damage they'd done? It was late one evening when the answer to that question arrived. My phone buzzed again, the screen lighting up with a message from an unknown number. I hesitated for a moment, unsure if I wanted to engage. But then curiosity won out. I opened the message. Olivia, I know we haven't talked in a while, but we need to. I'm sorry for everything. I didn't realize the damage we caused until now. Please, let's meet. For the sake of the family. It was from my mother. I set my phone down for a moment, my heart racing. I had expected them to keep pushing, to make their demands, but I hadn't expected this. This wasn't the apology I'd imagined. It wasn't the message I was hoping for. I thought back to everything she had said, everything they had done. My mother, my father, Bobby, they hadn't just taken money. They had taken my time, my trust, my life. And they'd never once asked me what I needed, what I wanted, what I could afford. They just expected it, just assumed it. But now they were reaching out. I picked up the phone again, this time dialing Monica's number. She answered on the second ring. Monica, I said, my voice tight. You won't believe who just contacted me. Who? She asked, already sensing the gravity in my voice. My mom. She wants to meet. Apologize, I guess. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Monica spoke, her voice steady but cautious. Are you going? I don't know, I admitted. It feels like a trap. I don't think they're really sorry. I think they just want something from me. Monica let out a breath. You've come so far, Olivia. Don't let them pull you back in. I know, I replied, rubbing my temples. I don't know what to do. It's hard to let go. You know? I do, she said softly. But you have to ask yourself, do you really need them in your life anymore? I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights below. No, I said firmly. I don't. Monica's voice softened. Then don't meet them. Don't fall into their trap. They'll never change. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. I won't. I can't. But even as I said the words, a small part of me hesitated. What if this was the last chance to fix things? What if my mother truly was sorry? What if they really did want to change? The answer came quickly. It doesn't matter. It didn't matter what they wanted. It mattered what I wanted. And what I wanted was a life free from their manipulation, their control, their guilt. I had given them enough. I had paid my dues. No more. Days passed and life carried on with its usual rhythm. The world outside my window seemed to move as it always had, indifferent to the quiet battles being fought within the walls of my home. My inbox continued to fill with business proposals and client feedback, but there was something hollow in the routine now. It was almost like I was waiting for something. Waiting for my parents to reach out again. For Bobby to call, for my mother to send another apology text. But they didn't. The silence was deafening, and as each day passed, the feeling that I had made the right decision began to settle deep within me. But that didn't stop the doubts from creeping in. One afternoon, as I sat at my desk reviewing some contracts, my phone buzzed with a message. It wasn't from an unknown number this time. It was a familiar contact, Bobby. I stared at the screen for a long moment before unlocking it. Olivia, I know things have been tough between us. I get it. But please just talk to Mom. She's not the same anymore. She's changing. We all are. I just want you to know that. Please. The words felt like a punch to the gut. How could they still not see it? How could they not understand that their version of change wasn't enough? That apologies without real accountability meant nothing to me? I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping me. The audacity. The nerve. I stared at the text, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. A part of me wanted to tear into him, to remind him of all the times he'd taken without giving, of the years of manipulation, of how he'd used me as a backup plan for his own shortcomings. But another part of me, the part that had grown weary of fighting, of being the person they always turned to when things went wrong, just wanted to say goodbye once and for all. Instead, I placed the phone down, walked to my window, and looked out at the city. The sun was setting, the streets below filled with people going about their lives. It was a reminder of how much I had missed, how much I had lost by being tethered to them. But now I was free. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I wasn't going to respond. I wasn't going to fall for their manipulation anymore. They had their lives, their house, their plans. It was time for me to have mine. A life where I didn't have to apologize for being successful, for building something that wasn't dependent on anyone else. I turned around and picked up my phone once more. I deleted Bobby's message without a second thought. Then I drafted a text to Monica. It's done. I'm not going back. They'll have to figure out how to live with the choices they made. I'm not their ATM anymore. Her response came almost immediately. You did the right thing. I'm proud of you. I leaned back in my chair, a sense of peace washing over me. This was it. I had chosen myself. And that choice felt like a weight lifted from my shoulders, a burden that had been suffocating me for far too long. I realized then that this was more than just walking away from my family. This was about choosing myself for the first time in my life. Choosing my own peace, my own boundaries, my own future. As I sat there, reflecting on everything that had led me to this moment, a final message popped up on my phone. It was from my lawyer, Zechariah. The fraud investigation is moving forward. We'll be filing the paperwork soon. You'll have your closure. A rush of relief surged through me. It was over. The years of manipulation, the guilt, the expectations, they would all be behind me. It had been a long road to get here, but I had made it. And now it was time to live my life not for them but for me.